All right, thanks for tuning in to another edition of the OFN Meeting Room on the Our Lads Football Radio Network. We're going to talk Tampa Bay Bucks football in just a minute. Before we do that, don't forget about ordering your Our Lads draft guide. I have mine. You need to have yours. Even if you wind up getting it the day of the draft, day after the draft, doesn't matter because you still, I mean, you're going to have all of these profiles. So you get all these profiles properly. See, look at all those profiles and all these players. That's just one page. Look how big this is. Look how thick this is. Look at that. And you also can order a subscription where you receive your draft review guide as well. So you can do that at ourlads.com. Okay, let's talk Tampa Bay Bucks football. Normally, how I start this off is I say, well, let's find out how things are going on with such and such team, but we all know what's going on in Tampa Bay. So let's get right to it with David Harrison, writer at bucksnation.com at SB Nation. David, good talking to you again.
Yeah, Greg, thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
All right, Dave. So we know what's going on. I don't want to spend a whole lot of time on it because the national media has spent more than enough time on it. This is about finding out about the entire team, but we obviously have to start with Tom Brady. So I don't know. Tell me something that might not be going around too much with the national media because they usually all pick on the same stuff. But give me something that they're not really zeroing in on that you think is important to note regarding Tom Brady, his position on this team.
Well, I mean, I think it's really, every conversation begins with Tom Brady as it should. I've done a few radio shows this offseason because of the Tom Brady signing and a few other podcasts, and even on our own show. The conversation when it comes to the Buccaneers in 2020 is going to start and end with Tom Brady for the foreseeable future. But I think that really is just a media production. It's an outside, it's a fan interest piece and all that stuff. But I think when you talk about the actual organization, Tom Brady isn't coming in there to be the focal point of this team. He's coming in there to be part of a team. And really, I mean, that kind of speaks to what Tom has done his entire career. Early on with the New England Patriots, their Super Bowl wins, early in his career weren't necessarily because of his greatness. A lot of them were on the backs of very strong defenses. He had some success with Randy Moss there in New England as well. Tom has never really been a guy who is looking to be, the Michael Jordan, to use a reference that's obviously out there right now in the world. He's never been, trying to go out there being the Michael Jordan of the team. He's wanting to be the Scottie Pippen, but because he's the quarterback, because he's got the look, he's got the personality, of course he becomes, the poster child. And it'll happen in Tampa as well, but he's really coming in. That's what you kind of got from when Jason Light talked about the conversations they had with Tom leading to the signing, is that when they called his agent, it was almost like they expected to say, hey, Tom Brady, here's why the Buccaneers work for you. What they ended up getting was Tom Brady telling him and Bruce Arians, hey, here's why I can be a good quarterback for your team. And I think that's just kind of that. If there's anything lost in the mix, it's really that Tom's attitude about this whole thing is not that he's coming in to be the missing piece of what the Buccaneers have been trying to do. He's coming in to be part of the formula and figure out how to work with everybody else.
All right. Well, let's talk about what he has to work with then on offense. And we know he's got the two studs in Godwin and Evans. Perryman's gone after a huge 5 or 6 games down the stretch. And I got to ask you, since I'm a Jet fan, how should Jet fans feel about Perryman? And is there a chance that Perryman could become everything that he was supposed to become when he was chosen as high as he was by the Ravens a few years ago?
I mean, I don't know that he'll ever become kind of like that number one wide receiver, that clear cut primary receiver that an NFL team can kind of lean on to really anchor their passing game, from the wide receiver room. But I think that Perryman can definitely become a very good number 2.
Okay.
And that's kind of what he showed after Chris Godwin and Mike Evans left, was that he had that ability to step up when needed. And that's something that he hadn't been able to prove in Baltimore, didn't really get to prove in Cleveland, not a whole lot of time there anyway. And then early on, even with the Buccaneers, there were some issues, field awareness issues. He had a couple plays that he could have gotten 2 feet down, but he didn't because he wasn't aware of where he was on the field. There were some drops, and that's kind of always been the knock on Brashad, even coming out of college, is that he didn't have the greatest hands in the
Hmm.
world. And I remember going back and looking at one of the scouting reports from the year he got drafted, saying that if you're a wide receiver who can't catch the ball, you're not going to be very successful. Yet there he was in the first round.
Yeah.
But throughout the 2020 season, really, you can kind of say this about the entire Buccaneers roster. He's one of the players that really just got better and better as the year went on. And by the time Chris Godwin, Mike Evans, unfortunately had to leave, he was kind of at that point where he was peaking for the season. And he really showed down the stretch that he had gotten better. He's getting better still. And as long as Brashad can go to New York and still look for that improvement, still look for that coaching and to hone his craft, as people like to say, then I think he still has that upside to become a really solid number two. Now, if he's in the mode and the mindset where he's proven that he can do it, so now he just is going to go to the Jets and show them again that he can do the same thing, then I think you might see a regression. But I feel like Brashad is the kind of guy who's going to go to New York and look to build upon what he showed in Tampa, and that's good. That's a good sign for Sam Darnold and anybody who supports the Jets.
All right. Sounds good. Optimistic. No question about it. And I know the Jets are still looking for a number one receiver. And I think that that is something that could happen if they decide to go that route, even though most people expect them to more than likely go with a tackle with their first pick. But the Bucks, speaking of wide receivers, see, they've got a pair of number ones. So the question is what do they do about that number three spot? Now, of course, if you take a look at what happened to them last year with the injuries, as you mentioned, so Perryman steps up, but there were more than just the top two were injured. Of course, you had some of the other guys that weren't completely healthy as well. But talk about those 2019 draft picks, Scott Miller and Justin Watson. Are they the best chance of possible? Can one of those guys fit in the number two role, say on the outside with Mike Evans? Or do you think that with one of their picks in this draft, they may go in, with this such a great class of receivers that they might say, hey, you know what? Let's just add on and give Tom Brady another weapon, just in case something happens like what happened last year when you lost both Godwin and Evans.
Yeah, I expect the Buccaneers to basically hedge their bets. They're probably going to come into day two looking at wide receivers. I'm kind of ballparking about somewhere in the third round. They had that third round pick. If they trade back and maybe gather some more picks, you might see something like that happen. But if they stick with the third round, if they don't spend that capital to trade up or whatever else is going through Jason Light's mind, I feel like third round is a sweet spot where they might target a wide receiver, if not at the latest fourth round, because like you said, they lost Rashad Perryman. Justin Watson's been on the team a little bit. He showed some potential, some flashes that he can be a consistent contributor. He also did well down the stretch with those guys being injured, but he's just never kind of become what a lot of fans kind of hoped he might have become. And he was a late round draft pick himself anyway.
Yeah.
Scotty Miller actually improved quite a bit during the season, and it's actually even more impressive that Scotty Miller was able to do that because he missed a very significant amount of training camp. Very specifically, he missed the joint practices with the Miami Dolphins, which Bruce Arians himself said those joint practices with other NFL teams are some of the best practices you can get. And the opportunity to go up against guys like Howard and Minka Fitzpatrick was still with Miami at the time. Missing out on those opportunities really probably stifled his development a little bit. But even still, once he got healthy and was able to come back to full practices, by the time again those guys got hurt, he was able to step in a little bit and contribute. Unfortunately, he went out with his own hamstring injury right as he was kind of getting to the peak of his own ability, but still showed that promise and that growth. So coming back with the second year, a year under his belt, he knows a little bit better how to take care of his body. He's obviously going to be hungry and he's going to look for that opportunity. A third round draft pick, when you're Scotty Miller coming into your second season, a third round draft pick's not going to scare you to the point where you think there's no way you're overtaking this guy. That's definitely a guy you can overtake. And as long as the Buccaneers don't pull the trigger on a first or second round wide receiver, I think Scotty Miller is definitely going to get an opportunity. And he kind of fits the mold. He's the kind of guy. Chris Godwin played in the slot a lot, but Scotty Miller's a guy who can line up in the slot if need be. And he's quick and he's actually fast. He's got the long speed and the short speed. So he's a guy that Tom Brady has taken advantage of having those types of wide receivers in his system before.
You're right.
So if he can stay healthy and he can really kind of bond with Tom early on, especially in training camp, if they can get these things rolling on time, then yeah, Scotty Miller's definitely a candidate. But I still look for the Bucs to add a wide receiver in the third or fourth round at the latest.
And there are going to be a ton of good ones in the third or the fourth round still. That's what makes this draft so deep as far as the receiver situation is concerned. And Miller was actually one of my one of my deep sleepers last year, talking about players who might get drafted, because he was somebody that we all thought probably be a seventh rounder, maybe a priority free agent, but the Bucks liked him enough to take him in the sixth round, and so far so good. So very productive career at Bowling Green. Those guys get lost in the shuffle all the time, which is the reason why you do your work. You take a look at some of these guys like Scotty Miller, and you can see that there's something there, and he's in the right system, and now he's got a great quarterback to work with. So maybe even it'll help his career that much better. Godwin and Evans, it's so rare to see two number ones on a team. Is there anything that will keep them from being together for the next 2 or 3 years?
I mean, in this business, you can never say never. Chris Godwin's in the last year of his contract, entering 2020. I think everybody's hopeful that they can get an extension done before too long. Hopefully, into training camp. Get him kind of locked in for the foreseeable future. If not, I mean, if he hits, if he hits the open market, then it's going to be game on, and the chances are the Buccaneers are probably going to outbid because somebody's going to pay him to be that number one, which
Okay.
is the talent level that he's shown. But I feel like Chris wants to stay with the Bucks. I feel like the Bucks definitely. I mean, they're definitely invested. I mean, they've got his picture on the outside of the stadium. They put that up last year, so they've definitely appreciated what he's brought to the franchise. Uh, he was in the uniform reveal video and the photo. So I mean, the organization loves Chris. They love what he's been doing for their team, and he loves the Buccaneers. I've gotten to talk to him quite a few times. Actually, had him on our own show a few times. He's a very humble guy, very appreciative of what he has and the opportunities that he has. So I don't see any reason that Chris wants to leave. He did move over to CAA, which is a little bit more of a high-powered agency than the one he had before, and they're kind of known for kind of turning the screws on teams sometimes. But the Buccaneers saw it with Cameron Brate when Cam Brate became an unrestricted free agent. He told his agent, he said, "Hey, look, being paid is great, but I want to stay with the Bucks. So give me paid as much as you can to stay with the Bucks. But at the end of the day, I'm staying in Tampa." And that's exactly what they did this offseason. The Bucks came to him and said, "Hey, listen, we love you, but we kind of need to free up some money. Can we renegotiate some things?" He told his agent, "Make it happen. Whatever's got to be done to stay here, I want to stay here." And I really think Chris is kind of made from that same kind of cloth and really wants to stick with Mike Evans, especially as Tom Brady is here.
Oh yeah.
He's going to want to stick around, I think. So I don't expect Chris to leave, but the business is what it is, and you can never say never. But
Sure.
I would definitely, if I had to put money on it, I would bet that Chris Godwin's going to be here for at least the next 3 to 5 years.
Okay. And another reason why the Bucks, it would make sense for them to add another receiver somewhere, third, fourth round, because even if you do take somebody in the third or fourth round, it doesn't mean that they can't become a big part of your team. Okay. Tight ends. So the big story over the past week has been the OJ Howard trade rumors. So what's going on there?
I mean, so the thing with OJ Howard is there's a stark difference, and you've done this enough, the difference as well, that there's a difference between a team shopping a player, like the Jaguars apparently are actively shopping Leonard Fournette, and there's a difference between a team taking calls. And we had this situation last year where OJ Howard was kind of a hot topic during the trade deadline as we got closer to the trade deadline. And the Buccaneers have never really made it a secret that they'll take a call for pretty much any player that you want to call about. Now, whether or not you're going to get a deal done is a completely different story.
Yep.
I don't believe the Buccaneers are really so much looking to trade OJ, which is kind of what some of the reports lean to, is that they're, to me, that sounds like Jason Light is on the phone with other GMs saying, "Hey, who wants OJ Howard?"
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't think that's necessarily the fact. I think
Uh-huh.
at the limit, I think maybe at the most, Jason has said, "Hey, if you're interested, OJ, shoot me your offers. We're willing to listen." So it kind of puts him in that like middle ground where we're willing to listen to offers about this player more than any others, but we're also not just in a hurry to get rid of him either. Whether a deal gets done or not, I don't know. I have my own personal thoughts on what adequate compensation would be, and I don't think there's many tight end needy teams that are going to be willing to give up that compensation. Uh, but OJ's kind of been a subject of trade speculation really since, I mean, honestly, since his rookie season, even there were teams who were talking about, well, if it's not trading OJ, it's trading Cam Brate, because
Hmm.
why do you need both those tight ends? Until something more solid comes out saying that they're actively negotiating with a specific team, I don't put too much stock into it just because we've heard this song for the last 3 years.
Yeah, it sounds just like what Jet fans are dealing with Jamal Adams. And what
Yeah,
I have to
yeah,
kind of
exactly.
remind everybody almost every day is that Joe Douglas is not shopping Jamal Adams. Just because they're calling him and asking him what it will take to get Jamal Adams doesn't mean Douglas doesn't want Jamal Adams on this team for as long as he can contractually be on the Jets. So, but it's New York, and it gets blown up even more. So I know
Yeah.
exactly what Buck fans are dealing with as far as OJ Howard is concerned. But if they did lose Howard, then the tight end position, I mean, at least that number 2 spot then becomes that much more important as far as the draft is concerned.
I mean, the way that this coaching staff is confident in their group of players, I don't honestly. That's actually what makes this kind of cycle around the OJ Howard rumor a little bit more easy to understand and kind of easy to see that it may actually come to fruition
Okay.
because they have Tanner Hudson, who is a young player, not a whole lot of experience, not a whole lot of proven talent, but he did a lot of great things from the camp and preseason. He's shown a lot of upside, a lot of potential as a number 2 receiving threat or option as a tight end. You can kind of see why they would go in that direction. And they've got Anthony Auclair, who from a production standpoint or receiving standpoint, isn't going to light the world on fire. Nobody's going to say draft him to your fantasy team anytime soon. But Bruce Arians has gone on record saying that Anthony Auclair is their best blocking tight end that they have. So when you talk about having to go into those big sets or adding a tight end as a blocker, if they were to move OJ, who is their best combo tight end, he can block and he can pass catch. Cam is definitely much more of a receiver than a blocker. Tanner Hudson, again, a better receiver than blocker. But Anthony is that blocker. So if they were to move on from OJ, they don't necessarily have to draft a tight end. I could see them drafting, maybe adding a 4th or a 5th round guy, maybe even later. But they don't necessarily have to, and they still have a good, let's call it solid, stable of tight ends, right? Whereas right now, I would say that with OJ and with Cam, they probably have the best tight end duo in the NFL. Losing OJ, you still have a solid group. So I guess it's kind of, again, that compensation factor. If they're getting a 1st round pick from the New England Patriots and they go and add a running back with a 5th year option, maybe they see that as worth it. But if they're going to, I don't know, a 3rd round pick from the Denver Broncos, then maybe it's not as worth it.
All right. Now let's talk about the running back position, because this has to be, on the outside looking in, one of the top positions of need for the Bucks. Barber's gone. Jones finally started to live up to his draft status last year. And now with Brady and this new coaching staff from last year, you would think that Ronald Jones is going to fit in nicely. But there's still a big opening, whether it's a 1A, 1B type running back, or maybe somebody to be the number 1 guy and Jones to be the number 2 guy. You tell me, but it does look like a definite need that they'll strike early for a running back.
Yeah, we're expecting a day 2 pick spent on the running back position, specifically the 2nd round. And you're looking at guys like Jonathan Taylor, DeAndre Swift, J.K. Dobbins, Cam Akers, kind of those top, names that everybody's kind of talking about if you're in need of a running back. Clyde Edwards-Helaire is a big time favorite. There seems to be quite a few LSU fans among the Buccaneers fan base.
Okay.
But all of those guys bring an aspect to the field that can complement Ronald Jones or they can do something even better than Ronald Jones. The big thing with Rojo, he did take, massive strides in year 2, and everybody was happy to see it. And Jason Light went on record during the offseason saying that they don't feel like Ronald Jones has even tapped into his full potential yet.
Mm-hmm.
And I would tend to agree. But at the same time, there is still the potential that Ronald Jones has reached his ceiling, so to speak, in certain aspects. And pass blocking is going to be one of those main concerns with Rojo moving forward. Hopefully it's something he's working on. He's a very hard worker. The kid works nonstop. So hopefully this year he's spending a lot of his offseason working on pass blocking and everything else, because that's really the biggest ding on him, which is why they're looking at guys like Clyde Edwards-Helaire. J.K. Dobbins is kind of one of my personal favorites to that position. Cam Akers is another one, kind of a later draft pick, probably 3rd round more than anything. But whether or not Rojo is the number 1 or the guy they draft is the number 1 is really just going to come down to training camp performance in preseason and who gives the coaching staff the most confidence. Because last year, Ronald Jones did pretty well on 1st and 2nd downs, some passing 3rd downs. But when he was asked to pass block in training camp in the preseason, he just didn't get the job done. So you saw Dario Gomboale come in to be that blocking back. The problem with that is as soon as you see Dari step on the field, most defenses can key in on the fact that he's just staying into pass block.
Yeah.
So you really essentially are down now. You're down to 10 players that the defense has to guess, and 5 of them are offensive linemen. So, it kind of makes you a little bit, not one-dimensional, but it definitely, lessens the depth of your offense when you put a player like that in. So they'd like to get a guy who can play in all 3 phases. And that's why Jonathan Taylor, Clyde Edwards-Helaire, J.K. Dobbins, DeAndre Swift, all guys who can come in doing something really well and all projects to be guys who could turn into 3 down backs if necessary.
Okay. So what you're telling me then is no chance that they go Swift or Dobbins with the 1st round pick.
Again, you can never say never. There have been some people pretty close to the Buccaneers who kind of speculated they may value the running back position high enough to go in the first round. I don't see it. I see offensive line being the priority. We know that the Buccaneers have 5 guys that they consider in that top tier of offensive linemen in this class, while most have 4. I think Josh Jones out of Houston is that 5th guy. So if one of those 5 is on the board at 14, there's even speculation they're going to move up. So earlier when we are talking, I said maybe they don't have that 3rd round pick. That would be why, if they move up to number 10 or number 9 or something, they may have to throw in that 3rd rounder to get up there. Uh, I think if they do that, it's an offensive lineman. So I feel like running back is a day 2 priority, but it's probably a hair's width as a lesser priority as far as position is concerned over offensive line.
Yeah, I'm not really that excited about Dobbins or Swift as a mid first round talent. That's just me. I think that when you compare them to any of the running backs that you would grade, say, as number 3 or number 7, I don't think there's a lot of difference. It just don't. I'd rather take Jonathan Taylor in the 2nd round if that's where he's projected to go. I just think in running backs, that's normally what happens anyway. Running backs you can find anywhere, and I just think this is look. They're good players. Don't get me wrong. I just don't think that they're special players. I don't think that they're not overly big. They've got speed, but they're not overly fast. They're not overly, they don't look like Barry Sanders. So there's good traits about these kids, but not enough, in my opinion. That if I'm, that's why I think that if the Bucks decide to go with a running back, it does make sense that they would wait until the 2nd or 3rd round.
Yeah, and that's what I echo the same sentiment. There's no Saquons in this class, and when you look at the potential of putting in even a Josh Jones, if that's your 5th guy and you get him, Josh Jones over Joe Haig, who the Bucks signed from the Indianapolis Colts in the offseason. Right now, if you had to play today, Joe Haig is probably your starting right tackle.
Yes.
But I would take Josh Jones over Joe Haig.
Sure.
Whereas, any of these running backs, Jonathan Taylor, all of them that we've listed, they don't come in and immediately replace Ronald Jones. They might compete, but there's that immediate starter mentality. And in the first round, I feel like you want to go and get a guy that in year 1 is going to immediately become an impact player on your team.
And when I look at the Bucks offensive line, and yeah, Haig is definitely the question mark. If, let's say, the Bucks didn't take an offensive lineman with their 1st round pick, I think the line in general compared to previous years is coming off a good year. It actually looks like they've got a couple of the young guys that are starting to learn their skill, their traits. Everything is starting to work out. A couple of veterans and so forth. Not a great line. There's those superstars on the line. There's definitely, it looks like, a lot of depth issues on the line.
Yeah.
But the starting 5, if it was the way it looks right now, if that was week 1, I think it's winnable. I think you can win with that, but I could see why the team would be looking to upgrade. So I think it's one of the situations where, do you think that they would, if they're stuck at 14, they don't trade down, and the top 4 tackles are taken, do you think they would take Josh Jones as early as 14?
Yeah, I mean, if all the reports coming out are true that they've got 5 top guys and Josh Jones is that 5th guy, I mean, if you have Josh Jones right there with the likes of Mekhi Becton, Andrew Thomas, and all those guys, then yeah, I don't see why you don't pull the trigger at 14.
Okay.
Me personally, I either look for a trade back partner. So we did a Locked On Podcast Network mock draft where I'm the host of the Locked On Bucks podcast, and we actually came up to pick 14. The top 4 that everybody's talking about were gone. So I negotiated a trade with the Minnesota Vikings. I moved back to 22, netted a 2nd-round pick in the process. They moved up, took Henry Ruggs III. I ended up getting Josh Jones at 22.
Yeah.
And then I walk into day 3 with 3 picks still in the top 100. So that's where I would rather go. If they are stuck at 14 and the top 4 are gone, me personally, I go with K'Lavon Chaisson, who it kind of contradicts what I just said because they're pretty set at edge right now with Jason Pierre-Paul and Shaquille Barrett. But that gives you a younger guy who can come in some of those heavy pass rush sets. You can just get all that talent on the line at one time or on the field at one time. And Jason Pierre-Paul, love him to death. He's been great for the Buccaneers since he got there. But he is older. His career is coming towards its end. So that gives you a young stud in there to pair with Levante David, Devin White, and Shaquille Barrett for the long haul. And I mean, that's a four-man team of linebackers that the Buccaneers could potentially hold on to for the next 5 or 6 years and just terrorize the NFC South.
Yeah, that's because when I look at the defense and 4-3 for so long, and then Bowles comes in and you switch to the 3-4. Uh, I know that's of course where Bowles would like to be most of the time, but you still had some of those 4-3 guys on the team. So is that what they're going to try to do in this draft? Is continue to try to bring in players that more fit Todd Bowles' scheme?
Yeah, I mean, they love linebackers. Bruce Arians has been on record saying they love linebackers. Linebackers make the special teams go. Todd Bowles loves fast guys who can get to the quarterback. So just screams linebacker all day. So I think you're looking for probably about 5 deep in your traditional defensive lineman guys, your bigger guys that can swallow blocks. That's why it was so important to bring back Ndamukong Suh, because while his stats weren't that impressive, and Aaron Donald kind of said the same thing, gave a hat tip to Suh after their Super Bowl run as well. The amount of blocks, the amount of attention that people have to dedicate to a guy like Ndamukong Suh does so much
Mm-hmm.
to free up some of those other pass rushers. I think you're looking about 5 deep at those kind of bigger guys, those bigger defensive linemen, and then the rest of them are going to be linebackers that can, play sideline or between the hashes and sideline to sideline as much as possible and just use that speed and take advantage of those gaps that are left by double teaming guys like Suh and Vita Vea.
And by the way, if it was Chase on, it wouldn't be a surprise because Light sure does like taking SEC players with his first round,
Mm-hmm.
with his first pick, doesn't he?
Oh yeah, definitely. And then the versatility. Caleb Wan can play all over the field. He can protect, or he can defend against the pass. He can stop the run. He's a smart player, sees the field really well. Leadership, war number 18. I think that's been covered pretty well. Got the number 18 for a good reason. I mean, he's a stud, man. At the end of the day, whoever gets Caleb Von Chase on is getting a stud and a leader for their team for a long time. So if that's your consolation prize, you tell Joe Haig, hey man, get ready to start. Don't let us down, and you're happy with the guy that you got on defense.
And by the way, as far as Barrett's concerned, congratulations to the Bucks for winning the lottery there, because for 2 years on my Jet shows, I kept asking the Jets to get Barrett. I couldn't understand when he was tendered for, I think, a second round pick the year before his final year at Denver. I was like, well, what are you waiting for? Second round pick? What are you kidding me? Pass rushers don't grow on trees, and he's obviously not. He doesn't get the reps because of who he's playing behind.
Mm-hmm.
It was just so obvious from his limited snaps with Denver that if you gave him full-time snaps, that he was going to be, or he could be, this type of player that he became last year. And it is like winning the lottery ticket, because when you're running that type of defense, it is so hard to find those types of pass rushers, which make all the difference in the world for that 3-4 defense. And the Bucks have their guy.
Oh yeah, most definitely. And Bruce even kind of went on record. I want to say Todd Bowles did as well. They were asked, did you expect this from Shaquille Barrett? And they're like, no, we knew he was a good player. We knew he had a potential and the motor and the desire. We didn't expect this, because I think if they expected that, they would have signed him to a 3 to 5 year deal.
Yeah, exactly.
Right off the top.
Yeah.
But yeah, he's another guy too, man. I'm from Colorado. My father retired there, so we kind of settled down there during my teenage years, and I've still got a lot of friends that are Broncos fans, so I kind of keep an eye and an ear on the Broncos. And yeah, Shaq has been a player that through his time with the Broncos has been kind of one of those unheralded people who, when he gets on the field, he does really good things. And the stats that he had compared to the usage rate that he had was actually really good. And you just kind of had the feeling that when he had his opportunity, that he was going to make the best of it. And shortly after he signed, we had him on the show, and we kind of asked him, when did you know your time in Denver was up? Kind of expecting like right after the season, something like that. He said a year and a half prior to him leaving, he knew that he was never going to get the opportunity he wanted in Denver. He didn't go as far as to say it was, a name thing. Von Miller, like you said, when they drafted Chubb, I think that kind of put the writing on the wall for him. He knew that, his time there was limited. And the way he said it was perfect. He just wanted to have an opportunity to prove that he could be a guy that needed to be on the field when the game started, and that they wanted on the field when the game ended. And he's done that. So happy for him and his family, man. He's such a humble dude, and just so appreciative of it. A lot of people were questioning, is a franchise tag going to make this guy mad? And I just kept trying to tell people, man, you don't. If you've ever met Shaq or talked to Shaq, franchise tagging this guy for millions of dollars for 1 year of work is not bad news to him. He does want the long term. He wants the 5-year contract. Of course, everybody does. But handing this guy 15, and I'd say handing, he definitely earned it, but giving him 15 plus, 16 plus $1 million for 1 year to play the game that he loves is not a bad thing by any means. So he's going to smile. He's going to take advantage of it, and hopefully, he and the Bucks can get a nice long term deal done in the process.
All right, and hey, Denver can just think about what could have been.
Yeah,
If they could have
exactly.
used that pick on another player, and they could have just given him the opportunity, Barrett the opportunity. But whatever, it all worked out for everybody, especially the Bucks. Okay, let's wrap up with the secondary. And boy, it looks like the team is in good shape with the Auburn teammates, Carlton Davis and Jamel Dean. Uh, you also have a couple of other guys that were high draft picks. Matter of fact, if you take a look at it, second and third round picks over the last few years spent in the secondary. But at least you tell me, because from what I heard, those two guys really started to play well together on the outside. Safeties, though, that would be more of a question mark. Evans coming off the injury. Whitehead was overdrafted when he came out in 2018, and he hasn't really played all that well from our perspective. Um, so I would think that safety and maybe another DB in general would be at the top of the list or near the top of the list.
Yeah, so for me and for the guy for most of the guys at the site, I can tell you that safety is a day two, priority. Free safety specifically. Jordan Whitehead is a strong safety. Really did kind of grow into that role. He ended up injured as well late in the season, but he really played well. Now, not all pro or Pro Bowl level by any means. Um, but what when we're looking at it, we kind of looked at it. Same thing with Alex Kappa, the right guard. And when you have players like that, the fact that they weren't week in, week out being considered guys who were a problem or a liability actually shows just how well they did.
Okay.
So Jordan Whitehead seems to be pretty good in that strong safety position. Probably expect a little bit of depth challenge there, but I think that the defense, I think Todd Bowles is pretty happy with what he did, and so they're going to come into the season looking to use Jordan Whitehead as kind of as a strong safety. Free safeties where the question is for me. Andrew Adams started more games and played more snaps at free safety than any other Bucks defender did last year. He's back on a 1-year deal. Mike Edwards was drafted last year, played a little bit in the slot, played a little bit of free safety. Didn't really take a firm grasp of any solid role, but he's coming into his second season. Really smart dude. The big story on him was when the Buccaneers were asking a lot of players that played against Kentucky or played at the school with Mike. They asked him, if you could bring any one guy with you, who would it be? And a lot of them said Mike Edwards.
Okay.
So bringing him on and that intelligence level, excited to see what he can do. Justin Evans, man, that guy had so much potential. If he ever get back on the field and stay on the field for a long period of time, I'm excited to see what he might be able to do. Unfortunately, I'm kind of leaning to the side where we may have already seen Justin Evans take his last snap.
Wow.
We'll see. So I feel like free safety is a position that the Buccaneers have some players they like. They just don't have a guy that they want to write in right now as a starter.
Okay.
So to me, that makes him a kind of a day two option. Again, a guy like Xavier McKinney at the 14th pick or in a trade back situation, he's a guy that definitely has to be in play. There are some rumblings coming out that the Buccaneers still would like to add what they consider a top shelf cornerback. So a guy like C.J. Henderson comes to mind. Bucks fans aren't going to be too happy to see the Bucks draft another Florida cornerback
Yeah.
after what happened with Vernon Hargreaves.
Yeah.
But C.J. Henderson is a guy who's getting a lot of love. A lot of people are expecting him to go in the top 15. I'm hearing that the Falcons are actually considering trading up to get C.J. Henderson. As of today, even there's some rumors that they're looking to move into the top 5, which you would assume is probably Okuda. I don't know. It's a lot of money to spend or a lot of capital to spend on a cornerback. But moving up into the top 15 for the Falcons to draft C.J. Henderson, he's the guy who's getting a lot of love. Trayvon Diggs is another guy that you could see the Buccaneers targeting if they are looking for kind of a top shelf cornerback. So the secondary, while it did do well down the stretch, I think the understanding is that the secondary did well more because of how well the pass rush was doing.
Okay.
And so there's still some need in there.
Okay.
But at the same time, they want to be careful because that dynamic between Carlton Davis and Jamel Dean, like you said, and even Sean Murphy Bunting is something they don't want to mess up.
All right. And then let's just wrap it up with the fact that the team does need a punter, correct? Could they draft a punter in the late round or two?
When Jason Light drafted a kicker, Matt Gay, that pretty much right there told me, I mean, I already knew, but that pretty much right there told anybody who didn't know that Jason Light will draft the best player at a position in need or the best player if they feel like they can use them, no matter what position, no matter what round. So definitely do not take punter off the board to be drafted. But I would probably say that they're going to go undrafted or look at free agents more likely than not. But hey, man, you never know.
And the picks in general, what do they have? Like 5 in the top 139, something like that.
They have one in the first, second, and third rounds, two in the fourth, one in the fifth, and another in the sixth as of right now.
Okay. And by the way, will David be back after he's got one more year left on his contract?
I hope so. Again, that's something we haven't heard any official rumblings of them extending that deal or working. But Levante, he's a guy just like what I was talking about before. He's going to want to stay if he can stay. He
Yep.
loves playing in a top bowl system, playing with Devin White there. But the presence of Devin White, especially if he comes into sophomore season and builds on an already impressive rookie season, actually just kind of builds more and more of the case for why the Buccaneers may not need to pay Levante David. But man, he's such a mainstay in that franchise, and again, one of the guys that they showcased in the uniform reveal. He's one of two players on this roster who actually played in the previous version of their new uniform. So that kind of shows the history that he's got there. I would like to see him back. I think again the team is going to want him back. It's just a matter of whether or not they can make the financials work. So we'll see what happens there.
All right, David. So at DH82_Bucks, that's your Twitter handle. You're also the co-host on Locked on Bucks. So where is the Locked on Bucks? Where can you find that?
You can find that on any major podcast platform, iTunes or Apple Podcast is now what's called, Google Play, Stitcher, Spotify, all those places. Any place you listen to podcasts, you can find the Locked On Bucks podcast.
All right, excellent. Great job as always, and we will look to talk to you maybe after the draft, sometime between post-draft and before we know when training camp will begin, and hopefully it will begin somewhere close on time. Right?
Hopefully, yeah, definitely, Greg. I appreciate it.
Thanks, David.